If you boarded a Boeing aircraft in the 1990s, you almost certainly didn't check the manufacturer. You just took your seat. Today, that name appears relentlessly alongside manufacturing failures, regulatory investigations, and whistleblower allegations. For most of the 20th century, safety and engineering dictated the company's direction. The executives taking the risks and making the final calls were engineers. They produced aircraft like the 747, shaping the modern aviation industry through rigorous technical problem-solving. Airlines and governments didn't place their orders based on slick marketing campaigns or aggressive financial maneuvering. They bought these planes because they trusted the decades of proven, flawless engineering behind them. How a company loses that level of trust isn't tied to a single catastrophic mistake or one bad year. It happens through a long, quiet series of decisions that slowly pull an organization away from its founding principles. The timeline of that shift points back to a press conference in 1997. Boeing announced a merger with its competitor, McDonnell Douglas. On paper, Boeing was the larger, stronger entity acquiring a rival. But as the corporate structures combined, observers noticed an unusual dynamic taking hold. Instead of Boeing's engineering-centric culture absorbing its new acquisition, the McDonnell Douglas executives and their management style began populating the highest ranks of Boeing. The definition of success inside the company changed. Directives pushing for maximum shareholder value, aggressive cost reduction, and hyper-efficient production timelines began coming down from the top. Those financial metrics were placed in direct competition with the slow, meticulous pace of engineering rigor. Nobody raised an alarm because the balance sheets looked incredible. The company was generating massive profits, and the aircraft designed under the old regime were still flying safely, effectively hiding the structural rot setting in at the management level. Placing financial performance above the realities of the engineering floor reordered Boeing's core values, shifting its primary focus toward the quarterly balance sheet. While Boeing was changing internally, a fierce challenge was accelerating externally. The European aerospace company Airbus was steadily chipping away at Boeing's long-held dominance in the commercial market. Then Airbus announced the A320neo. For airlines, fuel is the single largest operating expense. The Neo promised massive improvements in fuel efficiency, making it incredibly attractive to buyers and posing a direct threat to Boeing's future contracts. Boeing had two options: design a completely new aircraft, taking a decade and billions of dollars, or modify their existing 737 to compete immediately at lower cost. Under immense market pressure, leadership chose speed, birthing the 737 MAX. To match Airbus's efficiency, Boeing had to fit much larger engines onto an airframe originally designed in the 1960s. Those engines had to be mounted higher and further forward on the wings, creating an aerodynamic shift that pushed the nose upward during high-thrust maneuvers. When a company tries to solve a severe market threat by rushing a complex mechanical compromise, it bakes hidden, outsized risks straight into the product. To fix the nose-up tendency without physically redesigning the plane, Boeing introduced a software system called MCAS. This patch was designed to run in the background, automatically pushing the nose down to make the new MAX fly exactly like the older 737 models. But telling airlines they needed to put pilots in costly flight simulators would kill the MAX's core selling point: immediate, cheap integration. So Boeing minimized the existence of MCAS. Many pilots flying the aircraft barely knew the software was there. The consequences of that omission arrived in October of 2018, when Lion Air Flight 610 crashed into the Java Sea shortly after takeoff. Just 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 experienced a terrifyingly similar dive and crashed. Between the two flights, hundreds of people lost their lives. Initially, there were whispers of pilot error, but as the flight data emerged, investigators quickly turned their attention away from the cockpit and pointed directly at Boeing's internal design choices and the severely flawed oversight that allowed MCAS to be approved. The crashes represent the fatal physical arrival of a culture that traded engineering transparency for production speed. The global reaction was swift and devastating. Aviation authorities around the world grounded the entire 737 MAX fleet, leaving billions of dollars of aircraft sitting completely idle on tarmacs. Executives were called before Congress. Lawmakers and regulators demanded to see the internal communications, searching for answers about how accountability had fractured so badly inside an American institution. Eventually, the 737 MAX was cleared to fly again, but Boeing's crisis did not stop. A steady stream of new whistleblower allegations and glaring quality control defects emerging straight from the factory floor proved the internal issues were deeply systemic. When you buy a ticket, you cannot inspect the bolts on the fuselage or audit the software code. The entire global aviation system relies almost exclusively on trust, and Boeing has shattered that trust. Corporate culture is an entirely invisible force. You cannot measure it in a quarterly earnings report or plot it on a spreadsheet, yet it dictates every physical action taken on the assembly line. An empowered engineering department will halt a production line to investigate an anomaly. A financially pressured management team will see that exact same anomaly as a threat to their delivery schedule and look for a reason to ignore it. Institutions with decades of prestige rarely fall apart because of a single, highly visible mistake. They erode through thousands of tiny, accepted compromises, microfractures that build up over years under the weight of misaligned incentives. The most terrifying aspect of the Boeing story is how impossible it is for an organization to realize it is drifting until the consequences are catastrophic.